Hello, my name is Peter Lasensky. I'm the founder and CEO of NoteVault, and we provide a service that captures data on construction sites, aggregates it, beginning with the cell phone, using voice and photos and GPS location and IoT sensors in equipment and concrete drying rates and drone video and site cameras, etc.
Hi everyone, I'm Sonita Lontoh. I'm a Vice President of Strategic Marketing at Siemens. We're a global conglomerate, and my particular business is actually focusing on IoT for the energy applications.
Hi, I'm Piyush Modi. I'm in Business Development and Chief Strategist for the industrial sector at NVIDIA. And as you know probably, NVIDIA powers the gaming, entertainment, AI, self-driving car, using GPU-accelerated computing.
Hi, I'm Asanka Abeysinghe, Vice President of Solutions Architecture at WSO2. So WSO2, we are a technology company. We are providing an open source technology platform, including IoT, APIs, integration, so on and so forth. So my role basically helping a lot of organizations to digitally transform as well as build IoT solutions.
Thank you, guys. So as you can see, we have a really interesting mix of panelists here, autonomous driving, constructions, platform. So I want to start off with asking each of you, if you may, based on your industry and the area that you're working in IoT, what do you see are the complexities of IoT environment, specifically in the business you are in? So Peter, you want to start?
Sure. The complexities, the advantage of all this IoT data is huge, and some of the complexities are around being able to keep these sensors active without getting damaged during the construction process. Also tracking people. People tend to have an issue being tracked, so that's an issue. And then you've got materials where you have to have, all the suppliers using the same system to be able to capture the data from multiple suppliers on a construction site. Those are just a few examples of some of the challenges, but the advantages are huge in that if you can keep equipment operating and not going down, you can, which can stop the construction progress. That's probably the biggest issue that I see.
Sure. Okay. So for us, I guess the energy industry, I think, is slightly probably different from others in that it's really the intersection of technology, new business models, and policy. So that adds to the complexity. As I was actually looking at these questions last night, I was thinking, do you guys know that Neil Armstrong once said that our electric grid is the greatest human engineering achievement of the 20th century? And yet, now we're in the 21st century, this infrastructure actually has not been modernized to kind of deal with the challenges and complexity of the 21st century, where our energy becoming more distributed basically means that instead of coming from a centralized plant, it's now closer to us in the demand, our solar panels, our electric vehicles, smart appliances, storage and all that. And so the complexities, I guess, of the application of IoT in my business is not just on the technology itself that, is complex itself, but also there is the policy component that, has to align with that in order for it to succeed.
So I think the previous speaker said it right, that people don't buy IoT. What it's about is really connecting assets with the insights and generating outcomes. And if you think about it, everybody is projecting 50 billion devices connected by 2020, and you have different numbers out there. And how we progress to that, it's not going to be like we're going to build and they will come. You have to earn the business step at a time. And good thing about it is, actually the challenging part is that you're working in an industry, especially where there's a lot of capital invested. They are at a 4% efficiency, highly pressurized in terms of buying new infrastructure. So it all comes down to AI kind of is a godsend. Machine learning is godsend. So how do we transform the learnings we've gotten out of consumer internet into industrial? And articulating that value proposition to customer, winning them, helping them go step by step, one outcome at a time, and their outcomes are big. So if you think about it, bringing into 3 categories, they do a lot of inspection. That's why all these aircraft engines, locomotives we trust, and they keep running. How do we help them there? How do we help them in terms of automating? So robotics has definitely a lot of role to play. And how do we get them to avoid downtimes? The downtimes are huge, billions of dollars down. So these are the value propositions that we need to bring forth and getting customer on that journey, and that challenge kind of together, collaboratively, we have to help them overcome using the technologies that don't require them to kind of wait for a systematic way of evolution.
Yeah, so from the implementation side, I think the main challenge that I see, most of the projects are still following like waterfall type of approaches. In a space like IoT, you can't do that because the technology is changing, consumer experience is changing. So you have to be iterative, start small, release a quick MVP, and then build your project. So that's one problem that I see. The second thing is IoT projects are heavy technology driven. So the project approach is more, the weight is more into technology than the business, not looking at what exactly business needs as well as the end user experience. So that's the misalignment of this business and the technology I see as a challenge as well. Then the next thing is about IoT solutions are really unpredictable, especially when it comes to scalability. So the new systems might handle the scale, but the back-end systems, whether they can handle the unpredictability of the IoT solutions is another challenge that I see. So the last thing is the human factor, because you need a new set of skills to build the new IoT systems as well as to use these systems. So how you build this new set of skills, I call it as a digital workforce. So that's another challenge that I see with many organizations who's building IoT solutions.
Great, thank you. So, Piyush, you talked about some numbers, so let me start and sort of steer this in that direction. So there are some numbers out there. The industrial IoT is expected to be 200 billion by 2020, right? There are also some reports that IoT is nothing but a hype. It's the same old wine in a new bottle. So from your perspective, is this an incremental evolution or is it something more transformative? I would start with you there.
So it's a transformative, definitely, and lots of big players. If you think of likes of GEs and Honeywells or United Technologies, they're all rising up to it. Why are they rising up? If you think about it, the projection is 2025 is going to be a $8 trillion market, just the industrial IoT, which is kind of considered as twice of what we know consumer internet today. So just look at the magnitude. And why they want to do that? Because they just look at 1% incremental impact. So if you look at aviation, 1% fuel saving, their cost is about 45% goes towards fuel. 1% savings equates to several $1 billion. Same thing with locomotives. They just increase the speed by 1 mile per hour. It's a huge $90 billion value. Pretty much by that time frame. So value is set. They understand their value proposition. Lots of good economics articles are written on that. And a challenge is how you transform it. You're not going to throw away your factory with 400 CNC machines you acquired over, say, 20 years or 50 years. You have to retrofit. You have to respect the 3 laws that we heard in the previous talk. So those are the things you have to work through. But the good thing is, cameras technology, so sensors, and I pick camera in particular because we know a lot about what deep learning and AI is able to do in the imaging world, what it's able to solve in the speech world. It completely transform how we work. And same thing will apply to time series data that these machines produce. So how do we harness that as over-the-top technology, kind of the phrase I'm stealing from what we've seen with the iPhone when it got introduced in telecom. So A lot of telco had that plan to do iPhone-like experience. They couldn't. It just came to you as over-the-top over internet. So how do we give them this things that there is a demand for, value story, as over-the-top delivery method using the new compute that's available, and how do we transform what we've done in consumer internet experiences with social network and other places that we see, bring into the industrial. That's, I think, where the focus needs to be.
Great. Anybody, any other panelists have an opinion on that?
Yeah, actually, I want to kind of build upon what you just said. Totally agree with that. I have a slightly different lens on how I look at things.
This is what makes the panel discussion very interesting.
but I think it actually supports your point. So I think for the industrial infrastructure side, the deployment of it will be an evolution because, as you said, the customers, be it energy or large industrial, they cannot just rip off their infrastructure and put new things. So it has to be an evolution where they evolve throughout the journey, but the effects are definitely transformative because, you mentioned benefits, and I think a lot of the players, at least in my industry, we tend to be insular and we focus more on talking about the technology, but we do not try to articulate the benefits in terms that make sense for, let's say, end consumers. And I think that's really where at least the industry needs to do better is, as we help, let's say, our energy customers modernize their infrastructure, actually the end consumers like us would benefit because, for instance, I read a study that says, blackouts in the US cost our economy about $200 billion per year. And, this kind of IoT technology application for the infrastructure can reduce, blackouts by 10%. That's already $18 billion, benefits for us. But we don't tend to talk like that. And we tend to focus on the cool technology and less on the benefits. So I guess from my perspective, the implementation will be an evolution, but the effects definitely will be transformative.
Thank you. So let's try to speed this up a little bit. If one of my volunteers, if he can grab a mic and be ready, I want to at least get a couple of questions from the audience, if you could. But if you don't have a mic, you can come up in front and ask the question. I'll repeat the question. But in the meanwhile, Peter, construction is sort of the last place people would think about IoT because it's all about dirt and big machines and shovel. How does IoT play into the construction side?
Well, there's a saying that, if you look at the McKinsey study that came out recently, they identified that over half of construction projects are substantially behind schedule, up to a year. And there's thinking that says, well, the problem really was the schedule, not necessarily the construction activity. So by capturing all the data from the entire life cycle of the construction process, from grading all the way to completion, and analyzing that as you put new schedules together for projects, you can then look at actually what it took. So if you plan today that you'll take 4 weeks to do a certain part of the project, and the system can say, well, actually the last 5 times you did it, it took 2 months, you can create a more realistic schedule and have people have the proper expectations. And that would avoid litigation and allow people to identify areas that they actually want to improve. And that would be one big step. And of course, productivity is another major importance because the average tool time for someone working on a construction project is 38% of their day, and the rest of the time is trying to find equipment, trying to find tools, and
so
other
the asset
things.
management part of it. Yes.
Asset management, and the assets are finding the material you need, finding the people, getting the equipment and the tools there as well. So
time is money.
Time is money. That's right.
Okay. Any question from the audience here? Anybody has a question? I'm at a disadvantage. I can't see you guys well with this, but if anybody has, please come up to the front and or raise your hand, and we'll try to get that in. But in the meanwhile, again, so normally we think about sensors, network, and cloud as the 3 sort of components of IoT solution. So how does a software platform play in this? Asanka, you want to start?
Yeah, so I think the connectivity to the other software system is the key, because I can remember late 90s, one of my friend bought a refrigerator that support Bluetooth. So we went to see the refrigerator connect with the devices. Then after that, what? Like, it's a connectivity. It doesn't provide anything more than that. So similar to that, like if we create an IoT system without it connecting to the same the user stores and then same backend systems, you can't provide much value. And then the software systems help a lot, like because you need to manage the devices, you need to govern the devices, and then you need to control everything and have a holistic view of what's really happening on your entire IoT system. So it's the key part of these solutions, like how to identify what is your existing IT infrastructure, and then how you can bring an IoT platform on top of that, and then utilize the existing data as well as provide more and more value to your consumers as well as increase the consumer experience.
Anybody wants to have a stab at that? Piyush?
So I like to actually take this back to the previous question on incremental versus
If you could just
transformation.
take the mic closer.
Take an example of Uber, right? They didn't wait around to say, hey, I'm going to get every taxi driver to fit with some sensor and then I'll do this service. What happened is over the top, they leveraged very creatively cloud, mobile, and put together a service. And the whole transformation, what you saw is they didn't care whether 5G, 3G, 2G, whatever is happening or not. They just made something work which had a value to the user, value to the asset owner, and the whole thing has transformed our experiences on how we work. Same thing, we need to think similarly when we talk about industrial IoT. And I think for that matter, any ecosystem that involves more than 5 or 3 components, this is no longer, it's not going to be a walled garden. It's not going to be a managed play like mobile device was. There are multiple assets at play, multiple business stories at play. So you have to, if you're going to derive value for yourself, you have to think in terms of what customer is going to get today. And the good thing is that a lot of technologies available to us now. For example, if I have a 70-year-old machine, I can't think of connecting to it because it is burdened with a legacy PLC probably nobody even has a code for, doesn't have any connectivity, but I want to get time series data out of it. How do I do it? One creative approach would be I put a camera in front of the gauges and say, I can recognize that, something we can do today. No burden, no IT issues in terms of connecting the backend. So we have to think in terms of digitize at the source, bring the value for the customer, being creative, leveraging the whole kind of canvas we have available.
Well said, well said. Any questions at this point again? Okay, so let me repeat that question and correct me if I missed something. So we are all talking about connectivity and IoT. What about security? I think that's a question. So anybody in the panel want to take that?
Yeah, probably I can start. So I think we need to follow the fundamentals of security, and then there are a bunch of layers we have in IoT solution, like edge. Those are the device level, and then devices connected to gateways, then gateway level security, and then the backend system. So typical role-based authorization authentication might not work. Then you need to go into extended level, like things like standards like SACML need to be used. So whatever done, there can be edge cases. So best thing is to have a proper monitoring system, and then monitor real time, and then identify unusual behavior, plus predict some stuff as well based on the current behavior, what will happen next, and then have a proper analytical system, real-time analytical system, and then monitor this stuff. As well as we can put much governance, but it's really hard to put governance into basically a larger IoT system. So have techniques like surveillance, like whenever a device come and connect, alert, and then put any kind of policies on top of that and manage these things. So those are the additional things that you can do on top of the security standards that come in the IoT space.
Asanka, thank you for that. I don't know how many of you know this, but I just read a report the other day, since you mentioned about Uber. Uber is actually using WSO2 as a platform underneath in many of their things.
So Uber is using one of our the real-time engine that we have, real-time analytical engine called Siddhi, that's a CP engine, to analyze this stuff and do a lot of fraud detection in the IoT network.
Okay, there was another question here. Yeah. Now we are getting to the interesting part. So the question is, we are creating a lot of these sensors, and many of them are becoming Internet of useless things. So where is the value getting created? Where is the transformation happening? So, perfect question for any one of you.
Sure. So again, I mean, we are touching a lot of things: connectivity, security. You go to an architect in technical domain, they'll give you thousands of standards, thousands of things. You go in the market, you find lots of sensors. You can create a lot of Raspberry Pi projects. You can do a lot of wonderful things, but it comes back to thinking in terms of outcomes, and our focus, especially when we bring AI into industrial IoT, is around very specific three things, which is robotics. How do we enable these robots to do useful things, working and collaborating with users? Today, most of the robots are in the cage. So how do we get them out of the cage so that they are doing useful things? How do we help them avoid downtimes? With predictive maintenance, using the time series data, marrying the text data they have from service records and logs and many places. And then you have visual asset data, like look at the parts, what's the age of it? How do we apply AI techniques of the world that we have on existing data, existing infrastructure as over the top? And same thing with inspection. How do we give them tools of the day that allows them to look at, no matter which modality they come from in terms of sensing, they are able to predict, look at the asset and say, is it defective or not, and automate large part of it. It doesn't have to be 100%, but that's the way to think about it, to create useful Internet of Things, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, hope that is helpful. One more question here. Yes? How can IoT help in increasing productivity? We haven't seen much increase in the productivity. I'm just summarizing that. Please, yeah. Peter, go ahead.
So the first way it can help is understanding what the actual productivity is in a granular way. Instead of looking at the first half of the project, you can look at shift by shift data every day. And that would make a huge difference and allow you to determine who actually has higher production rates and have that person help teach the other people, other teams, how to improve their production rates. And another area that we haven't touched on I want to mention is just safety. Being able to capture the heart rate of employees to predict whether they're going to have a problem or not, and keeping people, getting home people safe is one of the main issues in construction. It's one of the most dangerous industries in the world, and that's another way that you can help with that.
Okay, thanks, Peter. So I have about 1 minute, so I'm going to ask you one question to all of you, if you can just move through it really quickly. So looking into the crystal ball and predict, what would fundamentally change the adoption of IoT in the industrial IoT world? Start from that, and Asanka? This is like a rapid-fire question, so.
Yeah. So I think the more coming up with more standards, because that's the main issue that I see. There's no open standards. Whenever a new device comes, it takes long to make it productive in an ecosystem. So make and more, like bringing the standards and then have more and more machine-to-machine connectivity, so on and so forth, will be, I think, the key.
Thank you, Piyush. One long sentence.
Yeah, let me give you two examples. Think about all the factories, continuous manufacturing, lots of defects flowing through. You have a human inspecting that cloth material or a fast-moving CPG product. Today we have the technology to detect those failures automatically. You do it in one industry, this will multiply, and it's just going to spread like that. And there are several examples around finance, retail, industrial, all of them. And that's what is going to, I believe, will get...
Thanks. I thought you would say every car will drive with NVIDIA technology autonomously, but anyway.
Definitely.
Next.
Yeah, I would say just the more and more they realize the benefits, and the use cases, and also like if there are some kind of like financial models that will make it for them less capital intensive, let's say as a service or outcome, based on outcome, I think that will help with the adoption.
Peter?
I think in the construction area, one of the challenges you have is that every project is different and it's changing all throughout the project from beginning to end, and making sense of all that data is a huge challenge and a huge opportunity.
Okay, I know you all have lots of questions, but unfortunately, the young lady is telling me end now. So if you could just give a big hand of applause to the panelists, I think that, they will be available after that. So if you want to ask any questions, that's it. Thank you, guys.